In the winter of 1881, a blacksmith named Cornelius Hatch walked into a federal holding facility outside Wheeling, West Virginia, carrying a leather-bound order ledger, a wax-sealed letter from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and 17 years of silence he was finally prepared to break. He had been summoned. That was the word used in the correspondence. Summoned. Not invited, not requested, summoned, by name, by a bureau that had never acknowledged his existence in any official document before that week. He was 54 years old. He had operated his forge in Moundsville, West Virginia, for the better part of 3 decades. He had shod horses for cavalry officers and mended wagon axles for settlers moving west. He had also, between the years of 1863 and 1878, fulfilled a series of commissions that he recorded in his private ledger with a level of precision that suggested he understood, even then, that no one would believe him without documentation. The commissions were for a single client. The client stood 8 feet and 4 inches tall. When Hatch finally spoke about what he had made, and for whom, the first thing he said was that the measurements were not approximate. The second thing he said was that he had shaken the client's hand on the day of their last transaction, and that the client's hand had enclosed his own completely, the way a man's hand closes around a door handle. The official record of the Bureau of American Ethnology's fieldwork in the Ohio Valley for the years 1878 through 1882 contains no reference to Cornelius Hatch. His name does not appear in any published survey. His forge is not mentioned in any regional inventory. The Moundsville property, where he worked for 30 years, appears in the Marshall County Land Registry with a notation from 1882 that reads simply, "Structure removed, land returned to survey." No explanation, no date of removal, no record of where Hatch went after that year. What the official record does not contain is the 44-page sworn deposition Hatch gave to a clerk of the West Virginia Circuit Court in October of 1881, a document that was accepted, filed, stamped, and assigned a case number. Case number 1881, WV114. A deposition that a researcher at the West Virginia State Archives confirmed in 1974 was listed in the index. A deposition that, when that same researcher requested the physical file, was described by the archives clerk as not located in its assigned position. Cornelius Hatch was not a fabulist. He was not a man prone to invention. He was a licensed master blacksmith who had supplied ironwork to the United States Army Quartermaster Corps on 2 separate government contracts. He had a business ledger going back to 1853. He had receipts. He had measurements. He had, in the words of the West Virginia Circuit Clerk who took his deposition, the bearing of a man reporting facts, not impressions. Within 4 months of filing that deposition, Hatch's forge was demolished. Within 6 months, his name had been removed from the Marshall County Business Registry, retroactively, as though the registration had never existed. Within 8 months, Cornelius Hatch had left Moundsville entirely. No forwarding address, no record of a sale of personal property, no obituary in any West Virginia newspaper for the following 20 years. He was 54 years old when he walked into that federal facility. He was never publicly documented again. Before we go further, if you find these buried investigations as compelling as I do, hit subscribe so the next one reaches you when it drops. The algorithm tends to suppress this kind of research unless you tell it otherwise. Now, back to Cornelius Hatch and what he made for the man they came to take away. To understand what happened in Moundsville in 1881, we have to go back, not just a few years. We have to go back to a West Virginia that the official histories of the post-Civil War era have compressed into a single narrative of Reconstruction and westward industry, and left almost entirely empty of the thing that workers kept finding in the ground. The Grave Creek Mound in Moundsville is the largest conical earthwork in North America. It stands 69 feet tall. It covers 3 acres at its base. It was partially excavated in 1838, and what came out of it, according to the field notes of the men who dug it, not the summaries later published by the Smithsonian, included skeletal remains that the attending physician, a man named Thomas Biggs, recorded in his private journal as belonging to individuals of a stature no living man in this county approaches. Biggs was specific. He recorded measurements, femur lengths, skull circumferences. He noted that the bone density was remarkable, and that the cranial structure differed from any remains he had examined in 22 years of medical practice. His journal was donated to the Marshall County Historical Society by his grandson in 1921. It remained in their collection until 1943, when the collection was transferred to a state facility during wartime consolidation. The journal is listed in the 1921 donation inventory. It does not appear in the 1943 transfer manifest. This was the world Cornelius Hatch had grown up inside. He had been born 4 miles from the Grave Creek Mound in 1827. His father had been present at the 1838 excavation as a hired laborer. His father had spoken about what he had seen. And Cornelius Hatch, unlike most men of his generation in that county, had listened carefully and written it down. What brought the client to Hatch's forge in the first place was a referral. That much is clear from the deposition summary that the 1974 researcher managed to transcribe from the index card before the physical file disappeared. A man described only as an agent of the survey had come to Hatch in the spring of 1863 and told him there was a commission available, work that required precision, discretion, and the ability to work from measurements rather than from the customer's physical presence. Hatch had asked why the customer could not come in person. The agent had told him the customer attracted attention. Hatch accepted the commission. 3 weeks later, the client came in person anyway, and Cornelius Hatch understood immediately why the agent had thought it prudent to prepare him first. The commission ledger Hatch kept between 1863 and 1878 covered 23 separate orders from the same client. Hatch was a methodical man. Each entry included a date, a description of the work, the materials used, the dimensions involved, and the agreed payment. The payment was always in gold coin, always exact, always delivered in a cloth bag that the client carried in what Hatch described as his lesser hand, the left, with the ease of a man carrying a hat. The early commissions were utilitarian, agricultural tools scaled to hands that no standard handle was built for. A mattock with a handle 38 inches long and a head weight of 11 pounds. A splitting maul with a 44-inch handle and a custom-forged eye socket 3 inches across. A set of harvest hooks, designed for a grip span Hatch measured at 9 1/4 inches from thumb base to the tip of the extended fourth finger. For comparison, Hatch noted in the same entry his own grip span was 6 1/2 inches, and he was considered a large-handed man. The later commissions were different in character. Beginning in 1871, The client began requesting edged weapons, not agricultural tools, weapons. The first order was for a short blade. Short in this context, meaning 22 inches of working edge, with a specific taper and a handle weighted for a hand of the dimensions already on file. The second was for a longer piece. The third and fourth were for a matched pair of implements that Hatch described in his ledger, with visible discomfort in his phrasing, as instruments of the kind a man carries when he believes a conflict is coming, rather than hoping it is not. By 1875, Hatch had forged 11 edged pieces for the client. Each one was collected in person. Each one was examined with what Hatch described as the thoroughness of a man who knows what he is looking for and has been disappointed before. Each one, apparently, passed inspection. The client paid in gold and said very little. But in their final transaction, in the spring of 1878, the client spoke at length. Hatch recorded what was said in his ledger in a separate section he titled, in his own hand, "What He Told Me." The deposition index card, transcribed by the 1974 researcher, indicated that this section ran to 11 pages in the original 44-page document. 11 pages of a blacksmith writing down, as accurately as he could, what an 8'4" client had said to him on the last day they ever met. The index card did not summarize the content. It noted only the section heading and the page count. And then the file was gone. But here is what makes Hatch's account different from every other witness record in this territory. In 1909, a retired Bureau of American Ethnology field worker named August Renner gave a series of informal lectures at a Unitarian church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A transcript of those lectures, 3 sessions, approximately 60 pages, was preserved by a congregation member and donated to the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh in 1931, where it remains in their Pennsylvania history collection to this day. In the second lecture, Renner described a field assignment he had been given in the autumn of 1881 in Marshall County, West Virginia. He had been sent, he said, as part of a 4-man team. Their assignment was not excavation. It was not survey work. It was, in his words, the documentation and transfer of a living subject. Renner described the subject. He gave no name. He gave dimensions that, within a margin of 2 inches, matched the dimensions recorded in Cornelius Hatch's commission ledger. A ledger Renner had no known access to, in a deposition that had already been made inaccessible by the time Renner gave his lecture. He described the weapons found with the subject. He described their construction as the work of a skilled smith, scaled for use by a person of the subject's dimensions. He described the subject's demeanor during the transfer as cooperative but not passive. He spoke at length to the senior agent and appeared to be issuing instructions rather than receiving them. If Hatch was telling the truth about who he had worked for, then Renner's account does not merely corroborate the ledger. It confirms that in 1881, the Bureau of American Ethnology took physical custody of a living individual of extraordinary stature, and then erased every document that connected them to it. The Bureau of American Ethnology has never adequately addressed the gap between its published fieldwork records for Marshall County and the documented activity of its agents there in 1881. It has never explained why a 4-man field team was dispatched to Moundsville in the autumn of that year for a purpose that does not appear in any published mission log. It has never explained why Case 1881-WV-114 is indexed in the West Virginia Circuit Court records, but physically absent from the archive in which it was filed. It has never explained why Cornelius Hatch, a man with 2 government supply contracts, a 30-year business registration, and a signed deposition filed with a state court, does not appear in a single federal or state document after October of 1881. Why would the Bureau send 4 agents to a small forge town in West Virginia for a subject who, by the official account, did not exist? Why does August Renner's 1909 lecture, preserved in a public library, available to any researcher, appear in none of the published histories of the Bureau's Ohio Valley operations? Why would a blacksmith with government contracts, a reputation, and a family risk all of it to file a sworn deposition about a client he could simply have never mentioned? The honest answer is that we do not know everything. What we have is a commission ledger, a missing deposition, a field worker's lecture in Pittsburgh, and a pattern of document removal that, even if it does not prove every detail of Hatch's account, is itself a story that demands an explanation no institution has ever provided. After 1881, Cornelius Hatch surfaces in the historical record exactly once. A brief notice in the Wheeling Daily Intelligencer from March of 1883 mentions a C. Hatch, formerly of Moundsville, as having appeared before a county magistrate in Ohio County on a minor matter of unpaid road tax, a sum of $2.15. The notice says the matter was resolved. It gives no address. It gives no further detail. He was 56 years old in that notice. After that, nothing. No death record in West Virginia, Ohio, or Pennsylvania for any Cornelius Hatch in the relevant age range for the following 40 years. No probate filing, no cemetery record. His forge site in Moundsville was built over. A machine parts warehouse occupied the land from 1884 until 1961. After that, a parking structure. Today, if you stand on that spot, there is asphalt in every direction and no indication that anything preceded the concrete. But the commission ledger survived. A descendant of Hatch's sister, a woman who had kept a locked cedar chest of family papers for 60 years without knowing what was in it, donated the contents to a private historical research organization in 1987. The ledger was among them. 23 entries, dates, measurements, materials, payments, and at the back, the section titled, "What He Told Me." That section, in the donated ledger, had been carefully cut out, every page of it, with a blade, cleanly, precisely. The cut edges were not fresh. The researcher who examined the ledger noted that the paper along the cut margins had aged at the same rate as the rest of the document. Whoever removed those 11 pages did so a very long time ago. The remaining pages of the ledger still exist. The measurements are still there. The payments in gold are still there. The grip span of 9¼ inches is still there. What the client said on that last spring afternoon in 1878, what he told a blacksmith in Moundsville that was worth 11 handwritten pages, and then worth cutting out of history entirely, that is still gone. The official record tells us that the giant mound builders of the Ohio Valley are a myth, that accounts of unusual skeletal remains were exaggerations, misidentifications, and the wishful thinking of an unscientific age. What the Commission ledger, the missing deposition, the Pittsburgh lecture, and the cut pages of a cedar chest document tell us is that someone went to considerable trouble to ensure the official record said exactly that. These stories survive because men like Cornelius Hatch were methodical enough to write things down, and because women like his sister's descendant kept locked chests without asking what was inside them. History doesn't disappear when it's buried. It disappears when no one looks for it. Subscribe and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Next week, I'm pulling a thread that connects the 1881 Moundsville transfer directly to a Smithsonian warehouse in Washington that was quietly decommissioned in 1907, and to a single inventory manifest that lists, in a column marked Non-Display Biological Material, an entry that runs for 3 lines and then stops mid-sentence. 1 year, 1 warehouse, 1 unfinished sentence. You won't want to miss it.